Hi everyone, my name is T.VEENA, Assistant Professor, Department of Information Technology, S.A. Engineering College. Today we are going to discuss about an important topic in database management which is called as a ER model. So before going into the topic, we are going to discuss about what is meant by database. So database is a collection of related data. So the data in the set, it can be called as a fact, or it may consist of a implicit meaning. So let us consider an example called person. So person consists of different attributes. So the attributes of a person can be name, telephone number, address, etc. So the person is called as a data which can be stored electronically through a Excel. So next we are going to discuss about the ER model. So ER model, in the name, it is going to explain about the entity and relationship between the entities. So ER model is again a conceptual view of a database. So ER model is used by the user and also by the database developer for identifying the structure of the database before designing it. What is meant by entity? So entity is any object or a thing. So object or thing can be considered to be a entity. So each and every entity consists of properties. The example for this is customer. So customer is an entity which consists of different attributes. The attributes can be name, address, credit, email, customer ID and phone. So these are all the properties of the entity. There are two types of entity. One is called as a strong entity and the other one is called as a weak entity. So each and every table consists of a primary key. So in this case, when we are going to consider a customer as an entity, it consists of a primary key called ID. So each and every customer can be separated with the help of an ID. So unique ID will be given for each and every user. So customer consists of ID, which is otherwise called as a key attribute. The other way, this is called as a weak entity, which is called as an address. So an address, the house number cannot be taken as a primary key because it doesn't contain the identical values. So it will be having a similar values when we are going for the house number. So this is a differentiation between a strong entity and a weak entity. So this is explanation where weak entity will be always represented by the double rectangle and strong entity will be always represented by the single rectangle. So now coming to the attributes. So as we discussed before, this is an example for an attribute. So let us consider the student to be an entity where it consists of different attributes together. So the attributes are such as address, name, roll number and age. All these things are considered to be the properties of an object. So here entity is nothing but an object. So these are all certain symbols that we are using in the ER diagram. So you will be using a rectangle to point out the entity and the double rectangle will be used to specify the weak entity. Diamond is used to specify the relationship. When we are going to use double diamond, it is called as a weak relationship that is going to exist between the two entities. So attribute will be represented by the ellipse symbol. Derived attribute will be used by the dashed ellipse, and multi-valued attribute will be specified with the help of a double ellipse. So there are different type of attributes. Something we have as simple attribute, key attribute, composite attribute, derived attribute, single valued attribute and multi-valued attribute. These are all the types of attribute we have. So simple value attribute means which will have an atomic value which cannot be further subdivided. So For example, when we are considering the student to be an entity, so it consists of a roll number. So roll number is again an attribute where it cannot be further subdivided, which is equivalent to the register number what we use with the student. So next we are going to discuss about a key attribute. So key attribute is a thing which is going to specify or it is going to uniquely identify any particular row in the database. So here for each and every student a separate roll number which will be a unique one will be allocated. So this is called as a key attribute. So key attribute will be always specified with a underline symbol. So next consists of a composite attribute. So it has more than one simple attribute. For example, let us consider the name to be a composite attribute where it can be further subdivided into first name, middle name and last name. So this is called as a composite attribute. The next one is called as a derived attribute. So here age is called as a derived attribute. Why? Because we are not going to get any values from the table, such as we are having an entity as a student. The student consists of three attributes, only three attributes. So first attribute is name, second one is address and third one is date of birth. With the help of the date of birth, we can identify the age of a student, which is called as a derived attribute. We are not going to get the value from the user for age. Instead, we are going to calculate with the help of a date of birth. So this is called as a derived attribute. Next is called as a single valued attribute. So if one entity consists of an attribute which cannot be further subdivided or it can have only one values, so that is called as a single valued attribute. The next one is a multi-valued attribute. So as we know, nowadays everyone is using dual SIM mobiles. So for telephone number, we can have more than one values that can be stored in a particular table. So here when we are going to create a table for student, we are going to store name, roll number, age with single values, and here the phone number is going to have multiple values, that is more than one values can be stored here. So which is specified in a double ellipse. So now we are going to discuss about the relationship between the two entities. So here we are going to have two entities. The first entity is called as a student and the second entity is called as a course. So both are going to be interrelated with the help of a relationship called study. So study is going to be a relationship that is going to exist between the two entities. One is a student, the other one is a course. So this is called as a association, or otherwise it may be represented as a relationship. So these are all one of the relationship that is going to be exist between the two entities. So here manager is entity, branch is the entity. So when we are going to specify like this with an arrow symbol, it is going to tell about the relationship. So arrow mark is going to tell the relationship as 1 to 1. So whenever there is no arrow mark, it is called as a many relationship. So here the branch can be 1 where it can manage many number of accounts. So in the same way, here many to many relationship is not specified with any arrow marks. So if anything which is not specified with arrow marks, it may be represented or it may be taken as many to many relationship. So now we are going to discuss about the question 1. So here we are going to consider the following ER diagram. So which consists of three entities M, P and N. So M consists of three attributes here, P consists of two attributes and N consists of the other two attributes. So here this can be a strong entity. P is also a strong entity where N is a weak entity. So we are going to consider the relationship between them. So here this is a many relation and this is 1. Again this is 1 and this is many relationship. So 1 to many relationship is going to exist here. So when it is going to be like that, we need to identify the number of tables here. So the minimum number of tables needed to represent M, N, P, R1 and R2 has to be given here. So when we are going to consider the relationship like this, when it consists of many to one relationship, so what we have to do is, we have to include the primary key of 1 to many. So here, when we are considering the relationship to be, that is the table to be M, so it consists of properties M1, M2, M3 plus, it consists of many to one relationship. When in this case, the primary key of P has to be included in the first table. So here it consists of P1 also. The same way, when we are going to consider the table N, it consists of N1, N2, P1 as a second table. So here one-to-one relationship is given for the table P. So when we are going to create a table for P, it consists of only two attributes. One is P1, P2. So here as a result, it is going to specify the result. We are going to create a table called 3. Okay. So one is M, N and P. So the answer for this question is 3. So next we are going to discuss about the question 2. Which symbol denotes the derived attribute in ER model? So as we know, the derived attribute is going to be always given with a dashed ellipse. Next we are going to discuss about question 3. So question 3, what is the minimum and maximum number of tables required to convert an ER diagram with two entities and one relationship? So here in this question it is clearly mentioned that we are going to use two entities and one relationship, between them with a partial participation constraint. So here we are going to discuss about two tables. So two entities, which is we are going to consider as E1 and E2. So each entity consists of a relationship called R1. Okay, so this is an entity E1, this is an entity E2, and this is going to be the relationship between them. So here it is told that it is going to be a partial constraint. So in that case it is given as single arrows. So here we need to consider two things. So when many to many relationship is going to exist between E1 and E2, we have to create 3 tables in minimum, or else when it is going to be considered, that is in a maximum we need to create 3 tables. In a minimum we can create 2 tables, one is for E1 and the other one for E2. So the right answer here is answer sheet C, which is minimum 2 and maximum 3. So next we are going to discuss about the question 4. Here consider the following relationship entity diagram. So here there is a relationship entity diagram which consists of person with 2 attributes, name and NID, exam with 2 attributes, exam ID and exam name, with a relationship between them as qualification. Okay, so here which of the following possible relation will not hold if the above ERD is mapped to a relational model? So we need to create a table for each and every attributes here. Okay, so we need to create a table. So when we are going to create a table for person, it is going to consist 2 values. One is name and NID. The second table is exam, which consists of exam ID and exam name. So we need to create a table for the relationship because it consists of an attribute. So in that case, by creating the table for the relationship qualification, it consists of primary key of person and the primary key of exam ID. So here, when you are going to create a table called qualification, it consists of NID, exam ID, plus it consists of an attribute called qualified day. So these three tables will be created. So table for A, table for B and table for D will be created. So now the out of scope is exam, which consists of exam ID, NID and exam name. So this will not come. So this is going to be the right answer. This question they are going to, they have told that we need to identify the wrong relationship. So here the wrong relationship is answer C. So next, question 5. Which one of the following is used to represent many to one relationship of a weak entity set? So when we are going to discuss about a weak entity set, always the relationship of a weak entity set will be defined with the help of a double diamond, which is called as a weak relationship. So the correct answer is option A, diamond with double or bold border. The last question in this topic is, which one of the following is true about relation R? So here, when we are going to consider options, the first option is every entity in E1 is associated with exactly one entity in E2. So here, they are going to discuss about the relationship of a attribute. So here, E1 is a relation, E2 is a relation, which is related with a diamond representation of R, where it consists of many to one relationship. So when a many to one relationship is defined, which means that these are all called as a entity set. So here A1 is an entity, A2 is an entity set, A3 is an entity set and A4 is an entity set, which is related with the other entity set of E2, B1 and B2. So here, when we are considering many to one relationship, which means many attributes of E1 can be related to one attribute and at most one attribute with E2. So the correct answer for this question is first option, every entity in E1 is associated with exactly one entity in E2. Thank you.